Mr. Bell,
Here.
Mr. Haw, Mr. Peterson, Mr. Dance,
Here.
Mr. Bergstrom,
Here.
Mr. Gentili,
Here.
Ms. Goodman.
Okay. And we have a quorum. And approval of the agenda. Has everybody had a chance to look at that? Any comments?
Move to accept the agenda as presented.
The time, is that?
Oh, I caught this morning, it says 10 a.m. I think that's just a boilerplate that probably never got changed.
Well, the last meeting was at 10, so I think it was just from
Just from
the,
last
yeah.
time, okay, so that'll be corrected to 12. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Public comment? Brandon will be here today, but,
Yeah, I told him about quarter after,
okay,
because he was picking kids up from preschool.
okay. All right, so we're gonna go over point 5, item 5, the update from Brandon Jensen on Right Side Design. Approval of minutes from September 13th meeting.
Motion to approve. Support.
All in favor?
Aye.
Treasurer's report. September accounts payable. Is there anything that stands out to you in this month?
There was not.
Okay. And we have a motion to approve the accounts payable if you have no questions.
So moved. Support.
Roll call on that?
Mr. Dance,
Yes.
Mr. Gentili,
Yes.
do I still say the names if they're not here? I don't have to say their names if they're not here, okay. Mr. Bergstrom,
Yes.
Mr. Bell,
Yes. And then the second part of that, the revenues and expenses. Balance sheet.
So I'll just make a comment on this, is that September is the end of the fiscal year, so this is kind of the preliminary end of year report. Often these things will change as a result of the audit a little bit as they pull things into the right period based on the rules as to what period things should go in. So there will be adjustments, but this is kind of where we ended the year.
It's not material, Barry, but do we know why there's a $300 difference? Then I know you said the contract for public charters from the expense should match the federal grant. And they're off by $300.
I cannot answer that.
So tentatively, we're about 11,775.83 in the hole. Correct? Looking at year to date. No, that'd be the opposite, that'd be to the good, to the positive.
And I think a large portion of that is the fact that we received the timing of grant reimbursements, because we got significant grant reimbursement from the land acquisition, and a lot of those costs came out of our pocket actually in previous years, and then the reimbursement came in this fiscal year.
reimbursements on either balance sheet or revenues and expenses.
Motion to accept the financials.
I'll second that. And that is a roll call as well? No, that's an all in favor?
All.
Aye?
Aye.
Okay. On those points, let's bounce back up. If Brandon is ready, Brandon Jensen, good to see you.
Good to see you. How you been?
Good,
Good.
thank you.
Doug, would you like me to get you a cup of coffee? We brewed
I'll
fresh
grab
for
that.
you.
That's right. I'm sorry, as he starts.
I know you didn't have time as you ran in here.
Anybody else?
While Brandy gets set up on the screen.
Did you start the video?
Yes.
Check now that you mentioned it. Barry, I like how easy your technology is here compared to most places. Nope, that doesn't work. Nope. Try that one. Nope.
But it only works if you're on the Google stack, so.
Well.
Not only can I drink it, but I can warm my hands up.
All right. So I'm on.
You're on.
So thanks everybody for having me in. Kind of everyone at the table. You're all familiar with me, mostly, I think. Brandon, Right Side Design Group. We're the ones that contract with the airport contracts with us to handle the marketing, public relations, and advertising efforts as it relates to the air carrier in public charters in the country sky.
Since you mentioned the word contract, our contract probably is expired,
Well,
so we probably need to update that.
also true. As of
It's a really good meeting.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Are there any other meetings that come up there? So I mean, we've done this probably since we started working with you guys in 2013. Every year, right around this time of the month. Well, actually, till the fiscal kind of aligned with everything. We normally come in a little bit later, but since everything is all in alignment, we usually try to get in around this standing board meeting to give you an update of where we're at. So this is just going through picking up items that we've discussed in the past where budgets have gone. I think when we first started in 13, I think our budget was around 85,000 because of the USDA grant application that we had. You know, and since then, you know, just funding sources have changed. The way that MDOT handles their grant has changed actually quite considerably, probably within the last 3-4 years. The availability of funds is not quite as high as it used to be, or anywhere near as high as it used to be, I should say. And then Barry let us know about the total funding allocation for this upcoming year. So there's 10 coming from the airport, 10 coming from public charters / North Country Sky, and then 10 anticipated from the MDOT awareness grant. That 10 is already committed, so that's not a grant that we're hoping to get. That those are committed funds. So when MDOT is really not that great at allowing us to get the funding when we actually apply for the funding. There's this long lag. So since the fiscal year for you guys begins October 1, we basically hold that funding, even though we can start spending it usually in late July. We don't spend anything out of that, so it's just a one-to-one relationship as opposed to some of the years
across
past,
fiscal
where
years.
yeah, that becomes very challenging to try to make sure we understand what year the match is coming out of and all of that. So this just keeps it very, very simple and clean. So $30,000 is what we have allocated for marketing efforts upcoming in the current fiscal year that you just started. This is a breakdown of where those dollars are spent. This is very similar to what we have done in the past. The change, the biggest notable change on here is the website reconfiguration and upgrade. That is a platform that was built in late 2015. We had some discussions at the marketing level this past year. We specifically talked about the website and how right now it is leaning heavily on a website that is designed as an airline website. It's really an airline website first because that is the central location where most tickets are being purchased. Not that we wouldn't have availability to continue doing that, it's just when we look at the other airport websites that are, not just in our region, but typically globally, there's a more balanced, effort on FBO, contracted entities out of the airport, and then, you know, airline activities.
And
We are obviously unique in that our airline and the relationship that we have with alternate is much different than what, you know, traditional EAS airports have, and that is, you know, here's the branded airline name, go here to get your tickets. It's always been this sort of hybrid model, and,
And
with the web,
I was gonna say, a lot of that stems historically,
Right.
because when we started, the name was Public Charters, which
drew a lot of confusion.
we had a hard time even grasping how we would market that, so, from the day Public Charters started, we basically focused our marketing on driving people to our website, and that being where the initial booking experience was. Probably 3 or 4 years ago, when they actually rebranded as North Country Sky and created a North Country Sky website, that requirement somewhat mitigated, although the quality of that website is still not where I want it to be. So we continued pushing all of our marketing to our website from a purchase standpoint. But going forward, if our relationship with Public Charters were to end this year, what we have doesn't necessarily make sense for a different carrier. And as you pointed out when you started, the basis of that website is now 4 years old, and it is in time, it needs a refresh anyway. So a lot of those things are, we're anticipating basically putting some effort into that, which is why it's on the budget.
Social media is still a primary platform from our referral-based system. That's still easily our strongest entity for gathering referrals in terms of existing customers interact with our advertising and marketing messaging. They tag, share to their friends, and they specifically then interact with the post. So this year, I would say over years past, we've had a lot more engagement in that, right? Both in good ways and bad ways, depending on performance and how the carrier is, you know, just what's specifically happening out with the aircraft and the carrier and the ramp. But Google and where that's gone, Google advertising we're actually reducing.
Actually, can I just make one
Yeah.
more comment on the social media? And we do monthly surveys of our passengers, and basically from the beginning of that, referral has always been the top, how did you hear about us, response. And in thinking about a few years ago, how do we encourage referrals? It's like, well, that's kind of what social media is all about. So we shifted a few years ago now to focusing on that, because the survey data says that's how people learn about us, and this is the tool we use to basically enable that.
Well, and the concept of that loyalty-based program is where referrals started, is how do we know we have people that like us, and we just need to continue to have them like us and refer. So in discussion with the carrier, being Public Charters, trying to figure out, okay, how do we spark that interest in that referral base? It was always an issue of management and logistics to actually facilitate more of a loyalty style program. So, because a challenge with their ability to potentially manage, facilitate, or maintain that, we diverted that effort to social media, just because it's where a lot of people were making recommendations and suggestions for the carrier from that point forward. Google advertising, that bucket has actually been reduced over years past, just because Google continues to be more and more expensive. People are getting the drift that a lot of people are using Google to find everything. So because of that, we're being very calculated in where we're showing up from a search criteria and remarketing criteria. We've trimmed a lot of the fat away on that those higher priced leads not as qualified. So we're really trying to target those that are the most qualified in terms of when they're searching, how they're searching, keyword searches, as opposed to it being more generic and broad as it had been in years past where we were finding better results. People are just, in this specific industry, what they call long string keywords are becoming much more common. You know, people just aren't searching for, you know, flights to Northern Michigan. I mean, they're going direct to say flights to Northern Michigan at $150. I mean, people are getting very, very lengthy in their search queries now, is what we continue to hear from our Google account managers, is that those long form keywords are becoming more and more prevalent. No one's just searching for things to do anymore. It's becoming very, very targeted. So making sure that we're showing up in those relevant keyword searches. And we recently, I think it was 2 months ago, Barry, if that sounds about right, when we sat down in here, it was following one of our marketing meetings to just look at the audit from social to Google, YouTube, to make sure that our customer acquisition cost was in line with A, industry standard, but B, what we expected to be at, and we felt that this is a pretty good mix of budget allocation. We're not spending too much in one area because you do hit that plateau where you start to just, I mean, you don't want to just spend money to spend money. So you're spending the right amount of money to get a fair amount of people. So, you know, I can't tell you, if we spend $18,000 in social media advertising, we're gonna get twice as many leads. I can tell you right now that is not the case because of where we're hitting on that arc. So you hit that arc and it kind of plateaus. All advertising mediums have that plateau, and the goal is to be right at around before you hit that peak out, and that's about where we are right now in these mediums.
Did you say P word? I think you said.
So when you go, yeah,
Keyword?
yeah.
Okay.
So you're talking keywords from a Google standpoint, yeah.
Okay.
So there's, I mean, I think we have hundreds of keywords that we have the availability to show up in, and those keywords are also dictated based on where you are geographically. So if someone's searching in Arizona for flights, they have to have specific keywords that'll trigger Northern Michigan or our service for us to show up in that. So it's not
Pretty focused.
Yeah, we technically, by definition, we have a national campaign, but you have to be pretty calculated in order for us to have an ad delivered to you. Do we have any questions on this? I mean, things like email marketing, that's traditionally been one of our most successful ways to deliver content to people. So and the reason that we know that is because we track the launch of an email marketing campaign with the analytics on the website to see the spike, and then we could track the transfer pages of where people are actually searching for fares. So it's very calculated. So, you know, at 8 a.m. the campaign goes out. We then see the traffic spike over the next 24 hours based on hourly breakdown when people are interacting with it. We then can find out when people are actually searching for flights. And I'll get into that part a little bit later.
But,
On the website, is the carrier responsible for credit card processing, or is that something you do through the design?
No, that is all the carrier. So right now, the public charters, there's a handoff that happens between our website and theirs, and I'll get into that a little bit more. That's been a pretty lengthy discussion that Barry and I have had in the past about that handoff, and those are some of those things that I definitely want us collectively to be thinking about.
I'm asking because that's gotten a lot messier in the last couple of years with websites and credit card processing and the amount of different contracts, even when you're just dealing with one processor. It's not just one processor anymore, it's like you're dealing with 3 or 4 different contracts for it.
Yep, and then you have different security encryption standards that are required on the website based on what you're actually gathering from a content standpoint. So your level of encryption is directly dictated on what you're asking that person to submit. I mean, it's, yeah.
So we don't have to worry about it.
No, that's a handoff before we even get to that point.
Is there any need to refocus funding at all, or not?
For,
Well, social media, we're spending $9,000 on it, seems to be a good move. Is there anything else on there that should be focused more than what we've got right now?
you know, no, and I'll get to that. I've got a slide in here that kind of talks a little bit about what we've done in comparison to what we had been doing. Then that'll, I think, answer that question.
I guess, an answer to that question, which I think is a little bit different, is these plans are solely based on the available budget. If we had different budgets,
Yeah.
we would have different plans and we would be doing different things that not to put words in your mouth, that you would believe we would be highly effective with.
Right.
But this is the best mix for the limited budget we have.
Every medium that we're currently advertising in, we actually have trackability in. Which, based on a budget your size and based on the fact of how people search for airline fares, this is absolutely the recommendation of the mediums that we be in right now, given our budget at this time.
But the reason I wanted to say that is, I don't think you would suggest that this is the optimal budget for our marketing needs.
No,
This is the optimal plan, given our budget.
given what we have, given what we can do, and in the way that would happen. So when I had mentioned, let's not spend $18,000 in social media, I would not spend $18,000 in social media and keep our market reach and segments exactly as they are today. We're hitting the people that we need to hit within that budget, and then as with any of our clients, as that budget grows or shrinks, the reach changes, because there's certain metrics that we want to make sure that we're hitting in terms of frequency, duration. Those are all parts of that equation on the backside of it.
Okay, yeah, my question was just really if we refocus it and.
Yeah.
And the other thing I'll add, because it's true of the email campaign, it's true of the remarketing, and it's fairly true of the social media, is a lot of our target are those that are familiar with us and are our past customers. Our email distribution is basically all of our past customers, now around 9,000 in that email database. The remarketing is, all those that have already been to our website. Social media obviously goes out, but, we do cast a wider net there. That is an area where we're trying to attract new.
Right.
So a lot of our marketing dollars are just spent to encourage those that are already familiar with us to think about us the next time they're booking.
Right.
Do we have an idea of like what the frequency is of those people that do we know who's over 5 times a year, who's 10 times a year flying?
In our survey results, fairly consistently, people say 4 times a year. In that range is what the survey response rate is how often do you intend or do you fly with us?
Are those budget allocations for the next budget season?
Yes.
18,
Even though
Yeah.
the date is wrong
Oh.
there.
Yes.
And I would assume that the base is growing too, is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, our email newsletter list has grown, and we were Barry? I wanna say under 5,000 when we first started,
Yeah.
and we're now up to 80, probably 8,200.
Again, per our survey results, I would say right now roughly 40% of passengers say they are first-time flyers with us. That used to be more like 60%, and it's been slowly going down, but it's still a healthy number that are first-time flyers.
And
So
given
those are then adding into the database.
given the feedback that we find through the social media program, a lot of people, it's referral. Let me tag this individual and say, you need to try this, you need to come up here during this time, try this, it's quicker than. I mean, those are frequent things that we see when we're monitoring that, where a lot of people are traditionally saying, hey, give them a try, do this, or, this is a really easy flight out of Chicago. Frequently what we see, but on the flip side of that, there's also the con to that, and that is, people saying, it's not flying when I need it to, I can't connect the way that I need to. I mean, so it's not all sunshine and rainbows, I mean, there's definitely that flip side of, scheduling challenge and some of those things that we know that we've run into in the past.
So we're seeing increased repeat flying then too, I would assume too, right?
I mean, the last year's been challenging because of the schedule shift, the schedule shifts that we've had. We definitely saw a loyal customer dip in that is what I feel, just based on, now that's not necessarily directly from comparing, you know, Barry's reports of this direct passenger to this direct passenger, but from what we saw on the social media side of things of people communicating was, you know, this flight no longer works for me, they're not leaving at the right time, I can't, that did definitely affect us. And I do have a slide that talks about that a little bit later.
Do we know what the hard cost is for the airport per passenger?
The challenge there is there really isn't a per passenger number, because we could have 5 times the number of passengers and our costs would be about the same from an airport
That's what I
perspective.
was going after, is you mentioned loyalty. And if you're at 4 per year, is there a number that we say, okay, if you fly X number, like a coffee club,
Mhm.
Get a freebie.
you get a freebie to try and incentivize them to fly more, but I don't know what that cost would be.
And that gets into an earlier discussion about a loyalty program. We were pursuing that a few years ago, but the systems of the airline are so incompatible. There was just no feasible way of implementing a loyalty system that would track that and allow that to
Can't
happen.
even tell us how many times the same person's flown with out of the airport?
Not,
In a.
they could run a
very-
custom report to answer that question for a passenger.
In a traditional, long form, here's my printout and then
Count.
one. I mean, that's about the level of sophistication that the back-end system is.
Yeah.
Which the airport has no control
Yeah,
over, which again, I
that's
was John.
fair.
So that goes back to a point for, stick that in the memory banks next year when you're bidding out the services.
Brandon's got more on
Yeah.
that topic coming up, so.
Okay.
Are we good with this? Because a lot of these questions will be answered in here.
It's just an observation.
Yeah.
It is amazing how you disappeared off my social media map when I moved to Grand Haven.
Yeah, you're not my target.
Yeah, I mean, there wasn't a day that went by in Manistee that I didn't have it on my phone or my laptop that popped up on the sides. And maybe I'm your target market because I'm a pilot, but, I hadn't seen it at all this summer.
Is that automatic then? Is that automatic to cross you when you're
It's all
outside?
zip code.
I'm not a good target
Yep,
market.
Yep.
All of that, all of the stuff you're doing is all zip code based on where you're at.
Zip code and then mileage from a center point that you determine, and then based on interest group, income level, I mean, there's a lot of parameters that you can drill down into. It's amazing what people give to social media. And give, I mean, I eat this and I enjoy this and so. So the markets, I'll touch on this, these markets haven't really changed, this has been these are the markets that we traditionally been in, but I did wanna make one specific note to that, is that after the summer, seeing what American was doing out of Traverse City, that's something that we had a lot of discussion about at the marketing committee level. I mean, having peak weekends, peak direction, and American coming in at 3:15 round trip, that's tough when we're pretty much level right on that. We had some points where American was cheaper, so we started shifting some of that social media focus out of Traverse City, just because our cost per lead was becoming just entirely too high. We just were no longer competitive. And quite honestly, Traverse City, they've had a lot of really good wins this past probably 6 months in terms of things to talk about as it relates to the airline, or the airlines that are being serviced out of there. So with that, we pulled the focus a little bit closer to home. Benzie is still a good market for us from a cost per customer standpoint, from what we calculate on our end.
Can't drop Mason County over it. Just my opinion.
We've pumped money into Wexford, Mason County, and it is easily our
Close to Grand
most
Rapids.
expensive market. And it's just the arteries, it's the vehicular thoroughfares that service those regions that is our greatest enemy. It's just known as a, well, no, I just will drive here to fly out. The options and availability are there. just an example of some of our messages that, you know, Doug probably got pummeled with during the summer months or when he was around.
I think parking would make a little bit of a difference, but.
It- I think there's another set of challenges, and I'll talk a little bit about that after kind of going through this year of just all the shifts and changes that have happened over the last 2 years with the air carrier. A/B testing, we did this in pretty heavily in the late winter through the spring. So this was specifically focusing on basically how often do you travel up here, and we're a convenient location to get into, and Midway is a, you know, so we were using both airports as a convenient. Midway is convenient, you can get in, it's easy, you get to northern Michigan. Of that, over a price-based message, so that this is just the creative, not the actual descriptions, because the descriptions would change a little bit based on the markets. But one was focused more on price heavy, one was focused on, you know, daily flights, keeping price really off that. The non-price message actually ran 8% cheaper to run in the same markets, and that was both noted. There were equivalent ads in all of our markets. So that map that I showed earlier, they were not just in Chicago. So this is the Chicago set. There was also a Manistee, Benzie, Traverse City set, and the, you know, we're a convenient way to get to Chicago, or we're an easy way to get to Chicago. You know, 1 hour south out of Manistee gets you directly into Chicago. Those convenience-based, geographic location-based messages were cheaper to run than price-based messages.
And by being cheaper to run, that basically means that all the fancy algorithms say this is a better message and
Yes.
it's being better received
Right,
than the other one.
right.
And I'll just add to that is 2 years ago, when we did A/B testing, it was kind of the opposite.
It was the opposite.
So as pricing has come down in Traverse City, that price-based message is less effective.
And that has seesawed back and forth over the years since I've been working with you. Sometimes it's very price heavy, or when we would push something that's price heavy, it resonates very well with people. Others, you know, shift to convenience focus. I mean, so it's constantly been doing this over the years, and kind of a moving target just based on the you know, demographics that we're in. We don't have it in the budget this year. This is one of the items that got pulled, but we did have YouTube pre-roll that was airing in both targeted audiences in both Chicago and northern Michigan. Weather, Yahoo News, in-app, that's where a lot of these would show up. They were very, very quick. They were only 5 seconds because you couldn't skip, they were non-skippable ads. It basically just had a, you know, fly to Chicago, fly to northern Michigan. So the spots were just, you know, subtly adjusted based on the direction. That was just one of the, I mean, that's pretty much as simple and easy as it is. And if I had the sound on, I could always tell my wife was on the weather app because I heard the Doja taking off. Again, the email marketing, these are just a few samples of some of the ones that most recently went out. You know, it's not just focused on sell, sell, sell. We have, you know, good information as it relates to, you know, the real ID stuff that came up. So it's an actual email news, and if you're part of it, you'll notice that it's not all just selling the service. So the airline, some of it is resource focused on what it, you know, means to be a traveler out of here and things to be aware of and get ready for. Our travel and tourism based items that we put in here, so it could just be picking up on some of the DMO items. That's destination marketing organization. Pieces that Choose Chicago puts on. They do a lot of list-based pieces, so, you know, top 5 things to do this week in Chicago or this month in Chicago, or top 5 events. Picking up those from a public relations standpoint, dropping them in here is, you know, those always resonate pretty well with both segments. So we do that typically for Chicago and northern Michigan. And for the northern Michigan side, we will frequently feature things in Manistee, Benzie, and Traverse City. That's where the
Is
bulk
it
of it.
generating some flights in, I take it?
It's generating interest.
Interest?
Yes. Sometimes it is even more, there's more interest in that than the harder sell of what it is that we may be pushing in that advertisement or that email marketing blast. You know, to the website, very similar to what we've been doing for years with you guys. If you're in Chicago, you're coming to a page that's specifically trying to get you to northern Michigan, and if you're in northern Michigan, you're specifically trying to get a page that's taking you to Chicago. So that's kind of number one that we do in any kind of digital marketing and advertising is don't drop someone or spend all this money on leads and then just plunk them on your homepage. Because from what we have found with most websites, the homepage is probably one of the most neglected of a website. They'll spend time like updating these price-based elements or something on this page that's 3 to 5 clicks deep in the website. Just if that's what you're trying to sell, just put them there right away. Don't try to make them navigate it themselves.
Those are attractive looking.
Thanks. Year-over-year return, so this is giving you just a baseline of where we were. So, essentially this is the current year that just finished to last year, or the prior year. So, again, the budgets in the buckets were about the same to that prior year. Now on the next slide, I'll show you what happened when we shifted focus into an all-digital marketing plan as opposed to the hybrid where we were still utilizing some traditional media. Around a 4% increase in users, and again, this is Google Analytics, this is not a perfect 100% absolute. But, based on page views, page count users, you could say you round just like a 5% increase. This is an important one. This is the only way that we have internally on our end to track what happens when we hand the buck off to public charters to have them reserve the flight, is this page. And this page was implemented when we first started specifically for that reason. It's a flight transfer page. It's a page if you ever booked a flight and it says, please wait, we're searching for your fare. When this is triggered, this tells us that someone is searching for a fare. Because we don't have any analytic engine at our disposal on the public charter side of it. So we don't know, in e-commerce today, things that are frequently discussed at these types of marketing meetings are cart abandonment. How far in the process do you get? I added to the cart, I checked to shipping, but then I dropped off and I fell away. Or I got to the point where I was about ready to purchase and then I fell off. Or I got to the point where I inserted my address, billing information, and credit card number, then I fell off. So we have no way to track that abandonment process.
And not only we don't, the airlines.
They don't either. Yeah.
There's no follow-ups, and there's nothing where if I dropped off, there's no follow-up email or messaging to them to go, hey.
No, because there's no infrastructure for anything of
Right.
that.
So typically, to your point, that's where you would trigger when you get your cart loaded and you're right at the point of purchase, if after 2 days or 1 day or a duration that makes sense based on the product that you're providing, that's when an email would get shoved to that email address that you put in saying, hey, we're still here. And sometimes companies would say, here, and here's, a 5% off, or here's a tchotchke, or here, if you order within the next 24 hours, we'll give you a blank. That's the advantage of being able to track, monitor, and market within the cart abandonment process, and we don't have that capability. And based on what has happened in the e-commerce world, having that capability would be a great asset to have.
You've got unique page views up there, is that?
It's, it depends on browser cache and a lot of those factors as it relates to what is, page view, what is a unique page view, and users and new users. I mean, that's why these are the numbers when we're looking for just a baseline average. We'll usually take these and just eyeball it somewhere in the middle. Just say roughly the site globally saw about a 5% increase in traffic year over year.
Are you happy with the 2.22?
Given the fact that we didn't really shift our marketing budget remained the same. And our volume of leads, especially from the Traverse City market, our Traverse City market was much more expensive in the peak season than it had been directly as a result of what was happening up there. I wouldn't say that I'm like, yes, that's great, but
It's not bad considering.
it's not bad considering some of the factors and the challenges that we had with schedule and what we knew from a monitoring of social media and just some of the scheduling challenges that we had. And I'm okay with this. Where I'm puzzled, not really puzzled, but from Barry and our discussion that we've had, it's just if we could just find out where they fell off further down the road, it would be a great
You have to
Because-
put this into context that our marketing efforts led to increased leads
Right.
coming in, but our sales were significantly down
down.
this year. So, and we know some of the reasons, Traverse City pricing obviously is part of that, so, you know, so I would, to answer your question, Doug, I would say, yes, I'm somewhat happy with the marketing, including those headwinds that we know existed. We were still getting to people, they were still at least looking. But, you know, we have this black hole that, you know, prevents us from doing more.
So something that we know, and is pretty telling on this slide, something that we know is that 95+% of our tickets that are purchased through our website, and that's fact that we know based on the reports that Barry gets. The rest of them are coming from OTAs, Kayak, Travelocity, or it's going directly to northcountrysky.com. So 95% of those that are booking tickets on our plane are coming through flymanistee.com. This past year, in comparison to the prior year, so a year ago compared to 2 years ago, that's the increase that we saw, a 22.7% increase to that flight transfer page. And it's because we shifted focus out of putting any dollars into traditional, when I say traditional, I mean outdoor radio co-ops, anything like that. We just cut it all and diverted those funds into our digital marketing campaigns. Because when people are searching for fares, they're doing it on the internet, online, in that environment, and that was a direct result. And at this point, when we saw this last year, but we still saw a decrease in passengers flown. I mean, it was almost
We were
flat.
fairly flat.
It was almost flat. But it's like, okay, we had this many more eyeballs on top of the product, but we still didn't see, you know,
How do you get them to buy?
well, part of the challenge is this slide, is the mobile side of things. This shows you the history of how many users interact with the website in a mobile environment. And by mobile, this is defined as phone. This continues to be the greatest increase in rate of change year over year. I mean, in 15, 16, I mean, there was half the number of users on a mobile device.
Searching on a mobile device.
On a mobile device. So that stigma of in years past, which is one that was certainly there, you browsed on your phone, but you purchased on a computer. That is now well out the window. So the mobile environment is the environment that people are completely self-containing their internet world, if you will, now. And we continue to see that as being a point that's made there. And unfortunately, when you go to a mobile device, this
Horrible.
is what you look like.
I don't even get bothered with any marketing to see it.
I mean, you can't, you physically cannot see, I mean, you can, but you're doing, you know, pinching and zooming and scrolling and
So much.
It is not ideal.
Well, and
Um,
that website, that booking process is identical today to what it was in 2012.
Yeah.
It has not
It's not
changed.
I mean, in 2012, when we first came in, an argument that we had talked about heavily was, I mean, we just need to even reorganize the buckets. I mean, the minute that you get there, you're having to put in email address, you're creating an account right off of the, I mean, it's just the way that you are tasked with interacting with that system is contradictory to pretty much every other way that you would book an airline ticket out there. And that, you know, when we talked at this table leading up to that EAS contract last time, this is one of those areas that it was determined needed the greatest area of improvement. So there were items that were discussed, well actually I'm gonna go to this and I'll go back to that slide. There were areas that were discussed as part of how we could potentially fix that. One of them was through the solution that North Country Sky and Public Charter Zones called Kiwi.com. This is where, you know, they were trying to potentially be a one-stop shop where you could book connecting fares. And Kiwi was allowing that one transaction process to take place, unlike what you have now where you have to book our ticket, then you have to go to Southwest or another airline in another hub and book from there. This would allow you to do it sort of contained within its own element, but because of, I mean, Barry, you had more conversations with Jim about this than I, but because of integrated computer architecture issues as it relates to saying that, you know, wait, stop, you know, issues with your bags, warnings that were flagging here, and the volume that we were able to bring to this platform, I think it just kind of fizzled. I mean, for lack of a better term. So this was really one of the only items that have been worked on from the air carriers end to try to streamline some of that booking process. It was never to really integrate or create a better user experience inside of the architecture that existed. It was trying to find another solution to replace it. And given the last 5 years of survey data, in all those 5 years, 50% of those that were surveyed were connecting. This is also a big piece that we were trying to fill that need as well, because at the beginning, almost right after we met, was it last year, this time last year, is when their connecting flight tool just, is that when it just, some architecture changed and it just?
That was, I think, 2
before
years
that?
ago.
Yeah. So we've not been able to actually, you know, so in the past, their programmer found a way to essentially search a connecting fare that would allow us to actually populate rates and availability. Something changed.
On
And-
Southwest.
On Southwest then.
Yeah.
Stop them from doing
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, so then that, we lost the ability to use that as a kind of a marketing connection tool. Even though you still had to book 2 tickets, it still allowed you to have one experience here locally, and then we could link you off, and it would at least help you a little bit further along in that process. So given the demand for connectivity, that really, I should have flopped these around, that really plays into the fact that, you know, in interline is something that would start to make sense, and since Southwest doesn't interline with anybody, you know, then it comes into the, is Midway the best, you know, potential airport with carrier. I mean, all of these sort of things become, and I'm bringing all of this up because, you know, we're gonna be getting into that contract discussion, and Barry wanted me to just bring in some of the observations from marketing end of how, from our view and frame of monitoring marketing and chatter out there, how and what would help assist the airport and the objectives here, as it relates to, you know, getting to that 10,000 passenger number, you know, because of that funding increase. But another note that I believe was challenging from a connection option this year, but probably the last 18 months over prior months, is that Southwest fares have gone up since, and you can probably tell that from the report that Barry, you know, provides with, you know, top destinations, et cetera. But also the fact that our average fare, you know, in 2018 it was 104.62, in 2016 it was 94 and change, this past year it was 110.19. So our average fare price has actually gone up per passenger over years past, and that's flying less passengers. So that, you know, when you get into those higher buckets, you know, you're paying more. So that's a challenge, is that with our fare being up, Southwest, the primary connector to our air carrier going up, scheduling challenges of flying a midday turn as opposed to morning and evening takes half the flights out of Midway off the table from a connection in certain geographic locations off the table. You know, it just really starts, you know, when you know this many people are connecting, and all of a sudden we're not looking as advantageous of an airport, no matter how convenient we are to drop into, you know. So looking at survey data that Barry has talked about that we look at social media chatter. This is sort of, some of it is database, some of it is anecdotal, but I wanted to put this in here as, you know, if I'm looking at what our passengers' top desires are, in the summation of the last 12 to 18 months of information, this would be the list. And that is, you know, is the air carrier on time and reliable? That's easily number one. And that goes directly to, you know, you can have the greatest, biggest carrier with all the interlines, but if we have a very low reliability and a really high canceled flight rate, I mean, at that point, I'm going back to the years of Great Lakes where they had all these interlines and, you know, decently priced, but they were so erratic from the availability of their schedule. Are they gonna be on time? Are we gonna make our connection? You know, so that on-time reliability comes with a little bit of, you know, red tape associated with it. Competitive pricing, that is one thing that we definitely noticed, and, you know, Barry and I, we talked in the beginning of summer, when we started looking at where Traverse City was at. I mean, never did we think Traverse City would go that low. I mean, we were traditionally seeing $650 round trip into and out of Chicago from Traverse City. And we saw our close-in bookings see a shot in the arm, especially that one summer, specifically as a result of that. And that just didn't materialize because those fares, because they were operating bigger equipment, more seats. I mean, just that's a blind demand.
Is there anything we can do about the reliability? Is there anything we can do about that?
You know, our reliability, by definition, is actually, it's good. It's not poor.
I would say that's the one area that the current carrier has really done well at. There have been periods where that hasn't always been the case, but overall, it's been the most reliable service, I think, probably going back 20, 30 years.
The only
So-
real blip in reliability that we had was when CFM,
Was on their way out.
when they were on the way out, reliability for that month was just disastrous, and we took a beating online about it. When they love you, they say nothing, but when they hate you, whew, boy, they come at you hard. Competitive pricing, the reason I have this in here is because right now, because of the EAS or the alternate agreement that you guys have, you know, there's a little bit more control from the airport standpoint to have that pricing discussion, which is important. Interline, I definitely put that at number 3, just based on the fact of the volume of passengers that are surveyed as connecting. So if there's 50% of our passengers are connecting in the convoluted, semi-difficult way to understand if you're not a seasoned traveler, and my wife travels, she refuses because she's, what do you mean I have to leave and then come back and get my bag? I'm just not doing that with driving to Grand Rapids. That's what I get every single time I even try to suggest a flat either. You know, so it just depends on, you know, kind of traveler confidence. So, you know, knowing that and knowing the market that we're specifically catering to as part of an alternate or an EAS airport, you know, in this immediate area, that's something to definitely, you know, consider of, you know, who our potential passengers are here and how they fly.
But it is number 3, so
It is.
having that and $800 fares, or having that and having flights canceled every other day is not going to generate growth either. So
Yep.
it's important, but you need that. Those first 2 I consider pricing less so, but that first one is really just the customer experience, the customer service. Do they feel like this is a good product?
Scheduled to meet seasonal demand, that's another big one. You know, just in working with you guys as long as we have, we understand completely the seasonal nature of this airport, and that's the seasonal nature of it based on the direction and the airports that we're servicing, or the airport that we're servicing currently being Chicago and that market and understanding that market. So, you know, that is something that we are unique to here specifically. Because, you know, in middle of the week, February, do we want 2 50-seat regional jet, or a 50-seat regional jet, you know, doing 2 daily flights out of here? And then furthermore, that directly links back to the reliability on time, because are they gonna send that 50-seat regional jet up here for 2
Yes.
people in a snowstorm? Nope, they're gonna cancel the flight. So those are the sort of balancing act pieces that we need to be very aware of when it comes to the next contract cycle. Rental car options to meet demand. Rental car has always been a challenge. You know, we don't have enough in the summer, we've got enough at other times. We don't have a national carrier. You know, and our national carriers are doing a lot from you know, that mobile experience, that hands-free, I can go there and boom, I can just get in the car and go. You know, I mean, so again, some of it is, you know, demand-based, it's technologically challenging. Barry's, I mean, oh my gosh, I mean, how many times have we gone around with locals about, you know, trying to get a national carrier in here has been challenging. And then a point to specifically bring up, because I know this is one that we had talked about quite a bit, is aircraft equipment. You know, at one point we were very specific that we did not want, you know, kind of a single prop, smaller aircraft. From what we have noticed, especially as aircraft has changed quite a bit over the last, 18 months. Honestly, I think that on time, competitive pricing far trumps what it is they're sitting on. I think that there's a certain cross-section of people who are, and there have been, what do you mean I'm not flying? I thought I was flying on a jet out of here and you got a propped plane sitting out there. Yes, that happens, but I feel that that is a much greater minority. It's just that they do make some noise. So part of the way to head that off is just setting expectations right at the onset. And I still think that on-time reliability, competitive pricing, if you can get an interline, you really control some of those major factors. Yeah, flying 6 times a day out of here with a 9-seat aircraft isn't the worst idea in the world. Is that going to meet seasonal demand? Well, no, there's other challenges that may have to be, incorporated as part of that. But, there was a lot of discussion at the last contract cycle about the equipment that was being flown out of here and the desire for a jet. Given when there's pricing challenge on certain ends, especially pricing challenge on what's happening regionally around us, and then you take that optimal schedule, and you start to throw that in a state of flux, even though you have a very nice, very comfortable regional jet, and we're seeing the passenger loads that we are, that tells me that equipment is not as important or as high a priority as we potentially put on it.
But that all came out of necessity anyway. I mean, the reason to go to the jet was not what we awarded the EAS contract on. It was, they couldn't find the pilots for the original plane.
Right.
So it was,
The original, which original plane?
well, the original plane Jim had was.
The Beach 1900, which was
Yeah.
supposed to have started
Well-
last fall.
Well, sure.
So we kind of got an experience of having better
By
equipment
accident.
Right.
by accident with worse other
But
factors.
wasn't the Dojet supposed to be, the Dojet was always part of our seasonal
Summer,
peak
yes,
service.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Um,
But I think that makes your point, is that even though we had the jet all off season, people didn't flock because of the jet.
Right.
We saw,
and people, I don't wanna say that
Flights
people
decline.
didn't like the jet. No.
No,
People like
it's
the jet.
the schedule,
Right.
the schedule's more
but the
important.
schedule and pricing
Yeah.
are factors.
Do we have, available from Jim or with our knowledge, do we have more passengers southbound or northbound? If we're talking one leg trips.
It
It's,
depends on the season.
it pretty much is, it evens out,
It evens out.
yes.
Because at Traverse City, for all the wonderful things that they've been able to accomplish with their airport, which is taking our pool down for travelers southbound, because it's easier and less expensive for them to get on a flight up there, then in the next 12 months, would it be wiser to focus more effort on bringing Chicago people up and seeing where the chips fall the other way? I go back to the golf show I was at 3 years ago in Chicago, and when we were there with Crystal Mountain, they had 2 booths, we had 2 booths, and the airport was in the middle. And we talked about Arcadia as well, even though Arcadia wasn't there. And, because everybody knows about Arcadia Bluffs. And the fact that people would say, what? You mean I can get on this? It's like we'd say, it's like your own private airline service. You can be at the Bluffs 30 minutes after you grab your bag off the airline. Why wouldn't you do it? I mean, it's just, fighting traffic. So I'm sitting here thinking about the casino, and, it's some kind of a message that is, you're 55 minutes from Airborne to Red or Black.
Yeah, yeah.
You know?
It's just very, very expensive down there. I mean, when I first got here, that's what I was going after, and the marketing person we had wasn't interested, so we had to change course. But we did that one program with the airport and really saw no utilization on it at all, where we did a postcard mailer to everybody in the Chicago area and offered them a free hotel stay if they showed us their ticket.
It's money. We just don't have the budget. I mean, we're trying to plump advertising in arguably next to New York and some of the cities out west. One of the most expensive DMAs we possibly can go into is Chicago.
Yeah.
So our markets, from a social media standpoint, by definition of Facebook, they constantly give me crap about how it's just, you're too tight, you need to broaden, and I'm like, no, because I mean, I need to hit a frequency of around 3 to 4, otherwise, it doesn't matter. I can't, I mean, these people are getting hit with brands that we up here have no interaction with inside of our social media platform because of the sheer volume of people down there.
Yeah.
So algorithm optimization, all of those things that are happening down there are happening at a rate that is almost incomprehensible compared to what we have up here. Up here, it's like literally, like you're sitting on a lake all by yourself, and you're like, well, I'm gonna catch something because I'm the only one out here. You know, down there, it's just, the competition for that airtime and that space, and that, because you think about the human doesn't change. I mean, the amount of screen time average and all of that is still about the same compared to people up here versus people down there. But the amount of brands that are making themselves available to those eyeballs down there, it's insane. So, I mean, actually, I'm really happy with where our Chicago numbers go. I mean, there's a big seasonal shift, and we're hitting a really good Chicago volume, 35, 50 cents per click to that landing page, and of that, 25% are checking a fare, which to me is a great number. And I'm always apprehensive to try to mix that up, because it's one of those things where you change just one of those parameters, that pool can get turned upside down, and, you know, it's...
I think the biggest thing is what he said like 10, 15 minutes ago is whoever you go with, you have to upgrade that mobile experience. And I'm stuck in Denver last night. I booked my next 3 flights while I'm sitting there. I never even thought to look at this, because if I forget these now, I can't even see Public Charter's website. I can't make heads or tails out of it on my phone. I can't even remember the last time I pulled out my laptop. I do everything on my phone.
And your phone is more updated, that's one reason why, because people update their phone at a much higher frequency than they do laptops.
But that site, it's probably been over a year since I went to it, because I just couldn't read it, it wasn't user-friendly. With 5 minutes it took me, I booked my next 3 flights, just sitting there.
And one of the main reasons why people typically flock to the mobile device as being the all-encompassing piece is because we're in a time where people are doing things as they remember to do them. So the quickest boot up is your phone. I mean, the minute you pull this out, it's booted up and I'm already on the internet, I'm at the, and then where the laptop is open the bag, open it, if it's shut down, then, you know, it's cycling, or floating, and but the thing is that even looking at that mobile number, I mean, back in 15, that's still what most people did. I mean, our desktop was 2 to 1 over the other mediums, and now it's completely reversed, and so it's 3 to 1 in the other direction. So, you know, that mobile experience is going to be really, really important. So, you know, getting into what the actual, go ahead.
Back to my,
Yeah.
I think going forward, and I'm not gonna be sitting in this room, so it seems like if there's a way to figure out how, or is it just financial, what's the story to bring the Chicago people up versus going after the Traverse City people south? Because they're gonna have to go back, so you're getting a round trip, but the fact that they are 5 minutes from landing to gambling, or 30 minutes from 2 of the best golf courses in the country, besides all the other fun things we've got around here, but you gotta tell the story of what's the coolest, you know? We're like a mini Vegas. For 99 bucks, you can be gambling in 45 minutes. That's pretty impressive. I mean, that's faster than driving across Chicago to the boats, I would think. But I don't know, you've gotta get to the person who's that target market.
We've tried, you know, we could specifically target on social, you can target people based on a different originating destination. So we've tried to target people who are here that are specifically just from Chicago. And the data points on it were so low from an interaction. Now, seeing it, yeah, they might have, you know, looked at it. Well, actually, I know they looked at it based on the impression rate, but the actual interaction point just is not, it just wasn't there from that standpoint. But no, I'm completely with you.
But if that's part of the discussion in the new airline contract, that how much are they willing, whoever we go with, to put into marketing? Because we wanna use that marketing dollars, does it, you know, we've gone backwards to 30, does it need to go up to 60?
So it's marketing,
How much are
and
they?
it's modern, active website experience. And the plane probably is not as important as we think it is. The schedule to me, the schedule and interconnectivity, those are the two biggies for me.
And that's for the passenger like you going here that way. If you're going after the customer down there, they're not going anywhere out of here. The goal is
Because
to
this
get
is
them
to get
here.
here.
Yeah, so over the 25 years of the history of airline service in this community, would it be safe to say everybody in this room has looked at it 50-50, or what can the airline do to get our people from Manistee out of here easily? And should the shift flip? And should the fact that we have this service here, it's getting harder and harder to compete with GR and TC, so should we look at this service as a, how do we get more people up? Because they have to go home.
So the other challenge is,
And focus less on you. You know, so does interline mean that much if that's your focus?
But I would say that that's what we've been forced to do the last 6 years, because we had a carrier that did not have connectivity. So we have, out of necessity, made that change. I mean, the fact that we're marketing in Chicago is something that we would have never done
Okay.
otherwise. It is
and actually
just-
are creating an impact. I mean, we do have the people that we target in Chicago, we're pulling out a referral base that are referring other people to come up here, and that's specifically a market that we're hitting where, doing email uploads to say, okay, these people who have this email address, if it's tied to your social media profile, it goes and finds more people that are like you. And they are, from that referral standpoint, tagging their friends and saying, oh, hey, you should try this. From that standpoint, it's really hard to beat. The problem is that it's the user experience, it's the, whoa, wait a minute, or it's the, I couldn't find him. I've heard that quite a bit. I couldn't find him. Well, it's easy because they're using an OTA that we're not on, or it's giving you that private carrier piece, and we're coming in at like $4,000 round trip or something absurd like that. That's the biggest problem that I've noticed going on certain OTAs, is that, yes, even by telling someone to try this, based on how users are, they're gonna go right back to the watering hole of what they're typically used to. So if they're like, oh, they got a flight that goes up, fantastic, Delta.com. I don't see any flight going on, fly Delta.
You think a
Delta,
world-class
so that's
golf
a-
course would draw people in too, so.
The challenge that we run into, we've always put, we've eventually just dropped it from the marketing budget, was the partnership aspect of it. We don't bring enough people up here on one load from Chicago to have a partner. And this is no disrespect to any of the partners. I mean, you guys sitting in the room, we just simply don't bring enough people up for you guys to spend a considerable amount of resources on. And Doug, you're interested, aviation and the airport and all of that. I mean, it's just, we can only bring so many people up in one load to move that needle from a direct kind of co-op partnership. And the hard part is, we know our best advantage to do that is at a time when seasonally the partners are the busiest. Because we've looked at Crystal Mountain, we've looked at the Homestead, we've looked at a handful of entities in our region to try to start having some initial discussions about, okay, what can we do? Is it a promo code? Then it falls short because it turns into, well, there's not this one transaction kind of booking experience that people are looking for. So that becomes confusing. And, I mean, it's been something we've definitely gone down that road of,
And
but
the
it's
thing that
hard.
I want to add to that is, what you're describing, Doug, you're talking about a whole series of different decisions. It's, what is the activity? The example you were giving is golfing. Where am I going to stay? How am I going to get there? Airline. Well, once I get at the airport, I need a car. So you've got like 5 or 6 decision points. And we're not in a position as being probably not necessarily, certainly not the most important of all those decision points, driving that whole
Yeah.
decision process.
Isn't it interesting?
But we are a piece.
Seems like
We
we
are.
built upon that though, because you had an offer where you get a free room for one night, right, if you flew in?
We got almost no response on it.
That's amazing, so I'm not getting to the people then, I guess.
So I don't
We're getting
have,
to the people because it was their database of
Chicago people and our
Chicago people
database
and
of
ours from
Chicago
Chicago.
people. I mean,
It just
You
was
live in
not
Chicago,
a
you got it.
compelling.
just I've got my airport hat on, which I don't have business in this town anymore. So if my concern is how many seats in the plane, because we need to get to the 10,000 appointments, right? So if that's the sole focus, I don't care who gets the business. I went immediately to the 2 businesses in this town that have shuttle service, so you don't need transportation. Arcadia will give it to you for free, and the casino will provide it for free. How easy can we make it? How easy is it to, you just need to get on the plane and let us take care of everything else. And and I had a gentleman come up and play in the cheese soup with me that's building our golf course, and it took all summer, he would not come north, it's too far. I'll go an hour to drive to play golf, I'm not driving an hour and a half. I invite him to this tournament, he comes to it. As soon as he heard we had a casino in town, he said, what, there's a casino there? He got here at 3 o'clock Friday night, didn't leave the casino till 1 in the morning. I think you did fairly well. But 10 hours he was in the casino, he was in the casino more than he played golf. And now it's like, that was the greatest experience, he was up here this weekend. So it's, that's just a typical story, I mean, he had a wonderful experience. Another couple came up with him this weekend, but it just, what a riddle to figure out how you can get on
The
plane
hardest-
and.
The hardest challenge is almost to Barry's point, and that is that we are the means to get you to what you want to do. We're not the reason you come up here. We're the making it easier factor, potentially, to get up here. And because we don't control that experiential narrative, because we don't have direct ability to drive or affect that as a representative of, like Arcadia Bluffs or.
Do you have any numbers that say you do much out of Chicago?
We do some, I mean, but to his point, for what we would have to spend for the cost of the advertising, there's no return on that investment. It's not, the step up in cost versus the amount of people we would actually get from it is too steep.
Yeah.
And with the limited marketing spend I have, I've got to target our mass base, which is Grand Rapids, Muskegon,
Yeah.
and I've diverted more because we've never really advertised up until we had the switch in the marketing department a year and a half ago. We never advertised north of us. So our whole existence prior to me getting there north of here was one billboard. That was it. We didn't do social media north of us, we didn't do radio, we didn't do cable, nothing. And I'm like, well, why are we not trying to get those people to come down? Because our product's better than what's up there.
It is, I wonder if something simple on your, and nothing is simple, right? But it's easy to make a comment, on your website that grab their attention on the first page, Chicago guests, click here. And they get to a staff member who can concierge them. Oh, you're from Chicago? Well, we can get here in 55 minutes. Let us check your airline flights for you. You could be here for 2 days and back.
And that's what I want to do, but
There's also limitations on the system that gets into almost some of the gym, like system travel agent.
like what I'm sitting here thinking is, my understanding of Jim's background is he started with charters. So has there ever been a discussion of having him doing junket flights here?
I brought that up.
It
When the
has
plane
been
was-
discussed,
when the
but
plane was
not.
sitting.
That's what,
Right.
the only way you're gonna get your return is if you know they're golfers, if you know they're fishermen, if you know they're gamers. Then you can start doing junkets through Jim and flying in junkets, twice a week.
Yeah.
Things bring more people to the table, like you're talking about too, fishing, experience,
Because like, I don't really do
gamble.
buses, the casino used to do a lot more buses. Buses aren't profitable. You're lucky if you've got 1 or 2 people per bus that actually play. So people say, well, we're not as crowded as we used to be, but your profitability's way up. So what would you rather have, people in here eating your free popcorn and drinking your free soda and using up space? Or do you want profit? So if you could find the right junket coming out of the right market, like you're saying, it's just, everybody in Chicago, they can get to a casino. To your point, maybe it takes them as long to drive there. That was the whole argument why in Colorado the markets didn't do so well, because you could fly from Denver to Vegas and be in Las Vegas without limits on what you could bet quicker than you could drive up during the winter time to Black Hawk. So Denver is one of the best feeder markets for Las Vegas. It's in the top 5. But yeah, we took their database, our database of all of our Chicago players, scrubbed it, deduped it, and mailed out a postcard and said, book a flight through Blacker, come in, show us your boarding pass, and we'll give you the room for free. And I think we had less than 10 people actually take up the offer. We actually have gotten a better return out of our partnership with Crystal Mountain than we did with that, with the stay and play with their golf and stay and play with the ski. We don't advertise the Arcadia, but we do have a relationship now with Arcadia. And if I can get the shuttle, an upgraded shuttle, if I can get that approved this month, but that's gonna take 16 weeks to build, then we can further grow those 2 relationships, because now we can transport you in a little bit better comfort.
So what's the reason that, you know, people from Chicago aren't coming here then to do some of those things? You know, skiing in the wintertime, casino, big fishing?
I don't think they've ever really done, in my opinion, and he would know better, and Barry, I don't think there's a cohesive group really marketing Manistee.
Mhm.
I don't think it's really come together. Like I was told when I got here, Crystal Mountain will never do business with me. I met the guy at one of those meeting of the minds meetings, and I said, you know, this makes no sense. You could have them all during the day, they can come over to us at night, and we can share the customer. 2 weeks later, we had a meeting with the owners, and they loved the idea, and we've been partnering for over a year now. I just don't think that group cohesiveness of, okay, how do we, I can tell you the previous marketing guy there, he was of the mentality, no, we just get them into that building and club them like baby seals, and we don't, I can do that in Chicago. The reason why you should come here is because there's all this other stuff to do. And his whole mentality was, no, I don't even want them to know there's other stuff to do. I'm like, okay, we're just not gonna work well together, because that's why people should come here, because you've got great golf, you've got fishing, you've got skiing, you've got everything else. That's why you should wanna come here.
Yeah.
I just have never seen that really marketed. Now I'm concerned because the only thing that has been marketed well is the M22 and the color tour. Now I understand that all got cut out of the budget.
How about the CBB? They should be involved in this.
I think they're involved with the M22 and stuff, but I don't know that there's really, because you've got the CVB, you've got the chamber. I mean, it's kind of disjointed. You've got the DDA, the CVB, and the chamber, and I don't know that, and maybe Barry, you're on 2 of them, I don't really know that the 3 of them ever really come together to market all the different options.
Missing the boat?
I mean, I've heard there's been some improvement in the past year, but I don't know.
I would actually say that our Manistee area marketing is actually very good. But I think there are a lot of other issues going on between organizations that are tarnishing our image locally. But I would say that universally, we are a drive-to destination. And that's the challenge that we have, is changing that mindset.
We can't solve this in a meeting today, but, and I don't mean to bog down your presentation, but it is food for thought.
No, I mean,
How do you switch, your Barry's last comment, how do you switch the drive up to a fly up? You know, and I think we saw it, I think Crystal Mountain has seen it, we've seen it, you've seen it. Chicago's expensive to go to, and the return on investment is terrible, unless you have a lot of money to play with. And maybe you can hit the right people that way. But we never, at Manistee, all my efforts produced nothing that I could measure. I'm sure they came, I'm sure they were on their way to Arcadia or the way back. But we have better success elsewhere. But the fact that we fly to that market, we're there. Unless we choose in this room to be somewhere else, should we put more of our little bit of money to try to get them this way versus get them both ways? So should we dump 10,000 more into, this is just food for thought for the future, do you put 10 more to emails and social media in Chicago around the airport versus any in Traverse City? It's just a question.
I think,
I don't know the right
so,
answer.
so my thoughts on this, just from a time perspective,
Yeah.
is our budget is fixed for this year.
Mhm.
And I think we can try to wrap this up. I think a complete rethinking of this needs to happen for next year, and that is, a lot can be driven by who we have as a carrier.
Yeah.
Because the carrier, if it is different, will fundamentally change the
Yeah.
balancing of all of those key points that Brandon had. And based on where our strengths and weaknesses are, everything's gonna have to be reevaluated. It's possible that we might not even have a carrier to Chicago. I'm not thinking that's likely, but that's a possibility, and, you know, that then changes, I mean, so I don't see, I mean, and I understand, you know, what you're saying, Doug, but given our limited budget, I don't think we can move the needle in any way beyond what we're doing, I think. And, you know, you haven't even really touched on this, but, you know, to maximize our spend on actually advertising, we're essentially minimizing management of the programs such that, you know, it's pretty much cookie cutter status quo from what we've been doing, what we've developed to this point to get us through this year, with the one exception being the website revamping.
And part of that is just making sure that that primary asset is ready to consume a change if a change comes.
Yeah.
That's the biggest thing, it's just putting the airport in a position of preparation. That's was our main discussion point, you know, of why to have that on the marketing budget.
So is the primary drive either they have homes or they have, they're leasing or?
Visiting friends and relatives via bar, that's our primary.
That's it, okay.
I can't sit in these meetings all the time and not be like somewhat consumed by the airline side. And what do you wanna know about the hangar? Kidding. I probably don't know as much as you guys,
Is that-
but I've definitely heard about it.
Is that your last slide?
It is, yeah.
Okay, I didn't know.
Yep.
Any other questions for Brandon at this point?
Good discussion.
Thank you, Brandon.
Appreciate the time today,
Thank
you guys,
for coming
yeah, and, yeah, any questions or anything, don't hesitate to relay into Barry, and, you know, Barry and I talk briefly. So, I, you know, part of it is not necessarily my own bias from the point about, you know, the marketability of our region. There is I think the greatest area that needs improvement is the interconnectivity of organization between what's happening. Because each organization, as it relates to funding sources, as it relates to goals and objectives, those all have, you know, everyone at a table may say they're on the same page from a big picture, but where it breaks down is when it comes down to the, you know, the tactics of, okay, we can't necessarily directly partner or market with that because this is who funds us and this is how we have to align, or this is how, you know, from CBB's standpoint with Crystal Mountain, and it's, you know, they're an assessing property of Benzie, but they're a huge asset that happens to be, you know, just on the wrong side of county line. You know, I mean, you could say the same thing with Cabernet Peaks, you know what I mean? So it's really, there's so many challenges between,
But well, the conversation I was having with Crystal Mountain was if we know we're booking a certain type of act or concert, and they know they've got a bigger event, if we scheduled them together to where maybe their event was on the Friday and our concert's on a Saturday, and we advertise it together, now you're now you have more reasons to want to come here.
More destination.
Yep. And I think that's the greatest challenge whenever you get into CBBs that are, you know, the size of ours here, is what the best medium to communicate those connections into another regional market. That's the biggest challenge that we see. We work with CBBs all over the state, and that's the biggest challenge when you hit sizes that the staffing is under 10 at the actual destination marketing organizations and entities, is trying to figure out, okay, how do we keep, you know, Discover Kalamazoo and some of those bigger, I mean, they have a staff of 5 that are just focused on interconnectivity of events to the private business sector. And we have a staff of 3. You know what I mean? So those are the challenge points, but I think that, you know, you're absolutely right. Getting those to talk better within one another, and you've already made a big leap by saying, okay, why aren't we partnering with Crystal Mountain? And then figuring out how
It's
does
like with the chamber, if they've got an event going on and it's gonna attract people, I have no problem advertising, I have no problem if they tell me far enough in advance,
Right.
putting it in our mailer that's going out to 80,000 people a month.
Sure.
Because if I can just plug it on my calendar and say, okay, here's another reason to come that weekend, because it's not just what we're doing, there's something going on in
And
town.
with the event getting out at 6, it's perfect.
Mhm.
What are you gonna do between 6 and, in that case, you know, 1 AM, right, Doug?
It's the primary purpose of the convention business, you
Yeah. What is the primary purpose, or that is the primary?
know? Is what?
Did you ask what is the primary purpose? Or
No,
what
no,
is-
I
Yeah.
know what
Yeah, yeah,
it is.
yeah.
That's what they need to be doing more of.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank
you.
Okay.
Good seeing you guys.
Good to see you. Committee reports and discussions. So, executive committee, we met, the end of, not last week, but the Thursday prior, and we went over the 3 contracts, so I'm the only one here from that committee. Barry is not here, and Jerry is not here as well. We reviewed the contracts with Barry, the airport director's contract, the Part 139 contract, which is all things related to the fact that we have an airline and what we have to do for that, and then the Orchard Beach contract, which is our fixed base operator. The only things that needed to be changed, again, thinking back, Barry has said, a year ago, we brought Barry current through the end of the 19 calendar year. With increased amounts, we were going to work on, at that point in time, we said we'd work on sliding scale numbers to make sure that we didn't get behind on what any of these contracts paid. Barry made an offer to, because of the budget situation here, to make 19 the same. So 19, the funds didn't change on what we pay in any of these contracts. So the only thing we needed to change in the airport director's contract were some dates. We got clean copies from George, and he just we needed to make sure we made all the dates proper. And then the Part 139 was the same, strictly dates. Am I correct on those 2 statements,
What about
Barry?
that paragraph that got the gentleman all upset?
That's what's coming up. So the really only changes were the changes to the FBO contract in how it relates to who's responsible for maintenance. So as we look at the fixed base operators agreement, we had to change the date to, you know, it began October 1st of 18. So we're asking Barry, if you are all in agreement today, we take a vote, Barry can sign these contracts, and that they extend to the first day of, the agreement shall be effective the first day of October, so terminate 30th of September 2020.
Just, I guess, walking through the changes on this one, since the other 2, the only changes are dates. This one, it's mostly dates. You might wanna talk about the iterations through this, because after the last meeting, you went to George. He drafted some language changes that are in here,
Yes.
and then that was presented to the committee. I provided some feedback as to changes that I was looking for that resulted in kind of this set of changes.
Yeah, so if we jump back to, on that fixed base contract, Barry,
Which is the one that's up here.
yeah, jump to page, other dates. George understood the situation, and he suggested the following addition. If you go back to page 8,
Do you have copies of this?
the copy, I went here, I didn't want to print out 10 copies of 3 contracts for you, so I felt it was easier to show you here. It's already gone to the committee recommends what we're presenting today.
Okay.
George added this line. There was no, so This is in regards to the fact that Barry, the FBO, is responsible for washing the windows, as I think this was your example. But if the window gets hit by a rock and breaks, it's not the FBO's responsibility to pay the bill to replace the window. He was just here to make sure it's clean and people can see through it on a daily basis. So when it comes to the fuel system, where is it Dave? At the county felt the language of Barry's current contracts and this FBO contract states that he is responsible for all of it, for fixing all of it, even into the tens of thousands of dollars. That wasn't the intent of the contract in any of the previous boards that were in this room, authorities. So George's suggestion is to change and get a bullet point in here that says that the lessor, which is the FBO, currently, or the lessor is the airport, will maintain and repair facilities leased herein, the lessee, Orchard Beach Aviation in this case, to provide normal operational cleaning and maintenance in a condition suitable and compatible with the purposes and services to be operated therefore. Other than date changes, that's the only thing George suggests to solve this.
That's not true.
I thought,
No.
no, then you,
There was, George had one other change.
I hate legal terminology,
oh,
therefore.
Is it yellow too,
Yeah.
Barry? Or what? Yeah.
So George also added this.
did I not highlight it properly?
You did not.
I'm sorry, for this purpose.
So what I just highlighted, that in the day-to-day maintenance and operation, was also something George added.
We're suggesting that we also strike maintain and. So the lessee, Orchard Beach Aviation, shall operate fuel storage tanks and pumps located on the airport premises, and the lessee, in the day-to-day maintenance and operation of this equipment, will comply with all rules, regulations, and requirements. So the lessee is responsible again for all the major financial burden.
So it's in there now,
Okay.
so.
So then,
That other section, I could still see this gentleman, because it still says maintenance.
Maintenance end is scratched out.
No, down
well,
in the
but
other,
in the other one,
Oh,
Page 8.
and,
I could still see him making the argument that operational cleaning and maintenance.
Lessee to provide normal operational
Yeah.
cleaning and maintenance.
Mhm.
Lessee is the airport.
normal,
No.
normal.
Less
Or
is-
excuse me,
so it's, the idea is it's trying to make a distinction as to
What
what
maintenance
maintenance is. So it's starting off as saying the lessor, the airport, will maintain and repair. So that's kind of the basis, but then it's saying that, well, you know, there are certain things that you should expect the
Wouldn't
operator
it be
to do.
simpler to have a definition section and just define two different definitions of maintenance as to what falls under daily maintenance and what falls under major repair maintenance?
But-
Wouldn't that solve the issues with Dave,
Yeah.
that the gentleman has with the current language?
That probably is, yeah, I would think that probably would be accurate.
you wanna roll to the, earlier in this contract, the
Yeah,
FBO
so-
contract, it states
so-
what Orchard Beach is leasing.
Well, so when I read this, and George's suggested changes here, it is saying the lessor will maintain the leased facilities. There is a listing of the leased facilities earlier in this document, and it did not include the fuel storage system as a leased facility. So I requested that that be added. Now
And I get that, I saw that earlier on page 2,
right.
but my concern is it
It's
says
still-
maintenance.
The word maintenance is in there, and it does mean different things.
To different
in-
people.
Well, theoretically, the context should facilitate the definition, which is why the language here, when it uses the word maintenance in terms of the lessee, it usually is, I think, consistently also talking daily or something like that. And when it's using lessor, it's talking maintenance and repairs. And the context of those is intended to answer those questions. But that's, may not be the case.
I guess the question becomes, we don't wanna run this by Dave for his opinion. We wanna solve this, and we all know the intent.
It probably just needs a little more fine tuning.
I can certainly go back to George with the request to add a definition section.
He's the attorney, if he thinks this is.
He understands the big picture, George Saylor. He understands what I described to him, the experience in the room, that I was on the phone and what Dave brought and Dave's problem with this and that he stormed out. He knows that story.
Go back down to page 8, Harry, sorry.
In parentheses there, that's clear to me that it's basically to operate those things, and if something significant becomes a problem, then that's the county, the lessor.
But my recollection was Dave was hung up on the word maintenance.
Maintenance, cleaning and maintenance.
Okay.
Could it be something like labor? Like the manpower type of?
Or we just remove the word maintenance, so the lessor will maintain and repair the facilities leased herein. Lessee provides normal operation and cleaning.
Repairs. Repairs is
labor.
where, yeah.
Or-
So the leasee is the leasee,
Orchard Beach in this case.
Orchard Beach, is there for day-to-day operational maintenance, day-to-day, not repair and maintenance.
Yeah, you don't wanna use the repair for the lessor, yeah, it does, but.
Which is what that says.
The lessor.
But it uses the word maintenance in both,
Okay.
Which confuses it.
and in the first for lessor, it talks about maintenance and repair. And in lessee, it talks about daily operational cleaning and maintenance. So the intention is that those qualifications provide the context of the definition of that word maintenance in those two scenarios. But because it's using the same word, there is ambiguity.
Doesn't it come down, and again, this goes back to my point with Dave, doesn't it come down to a logical person, whether in a court system or not, would ask what the intent of the individuals that prepared the contract? So if we were ever called to a meeting to say, no, by this Dave, Barry is still responsible. No, he's not. We all had this discussion, we went to an attorney, we came back, and this is what this is what it says.
Well, we're paying big bucks for an attorney, I would hope he'd give us the right legal words here, so.
Guess at the end of the day, Orchard Beach is signing this, so if you're comfortable that this addresses the actual business relationship, and George is saying it does,
And if the board, as it is,
I'd hate to go back and incur more legal fees.
yeah, I would too.
Well, okay, so if we had a motion to accept the 3 contracts with the date changes on the first 2 and the adjustments per George on the fixed base operators agreement, then then you and I could sign them. If you want to have, or you and I have a discussion with George on the telephone to make your comfort level before you sign that document stronger, then we don't have to come back to this authority. But if you, after that conversation, say, no, I'm not comfortable, let's get this changed, then we'll just, that one document will take another month to get done. I'm okay either way.
I'm comfortable with this language.
Okay.
Um,
All right, so based on the committee's recommendation, I would put forth a motion that we update the contracts as presented for the airport director's agreement with simple date changes. The Part 139 contract with simple date changes. And the FBO contract with date and language changes.
Can we put in the minutes that the language changes are to reflect the difference between major repairs and?
Daily maintenance.
Daily maintenance and repairs, not major, just repairs, to be separate between that and daily maintenance, operations and maintenance.
That way the intent is documented in the minutes if it's ever raised in the future.
And how, just re-say that how you want it. Language changes to reflect,
The meaning, the difference in the meaning between daily maintenance and operations and repair and maintenance.
Discussion? Or a second?
I'll second it.
And assume that's a roll call.
When in doubt, always call.
Mr. Dons,
Yes.
Mr. Gentili,
Yes.
Mr. Bergstrom,
Yes.
Mr. Bell.
Yes. And I know that the other two on that committee were in favor of it. Budget committee did not meet. The capital projects committee did meet. And I'll hand this out before I speak. So this document is fresh as of this morning. So we met with the main purpose of that capital meeting, it had two parts to it. One, the proposal by Ryan Shively on the large box hanger out there and what could we do to work with him so that he improved that box hanger and it would have a, it would become a, not an expense, but an asset generating building for the airport. The second part of our committee meeting was just to bring the committee up to speed on, still chasing down numbers on painting and everything else to do with the T-hangers. So that, I don't have a full report yet. Well, let me start with that. I did meet with a painting contractor. We provided information to him after the meeting, within days of that meeting, on a product to put on the ceiling, or the outside roof of the T-hangers that was researched by Jerry Hawk. He had the square footage, the pricing, and everything. So we were just running past a local painting contractor to get a ballpark estimate on painting that building. They know that it would go out to bid if we decide to do this, and they'd have to start all over, but they're willing to give us an idea. So we kind of have a feeling of what it would cost to pay for 9 sets of doors and painting that building to finish that job, and then I probably won't be here when this decision's made, but then the authority can make a decision on whether they want to go to the county saying, here's a true cost to finish that building in one shot. If that's the case, should we borrow the money from the county, get it done, and then have a proper payback schedule? So that's still in process. So that's the end of that discussion. So the major portion of this meeting was to try to address and figure out a way to address Ryan Shively's desire to move into the old PCA box hangar. So Andrew and Jerry and I met, put a bunch of notes down here, went back to George with where do we start, what can we do and can't do. We left that meeting hoping we could come up with two things. A land contract to sell him the building, and a long-term ground lease that would be similar to Barry's, what Orchard Beach has with the large gray hangar and with the other hangar that's over there for sale.
Ted?
Ted Aaron's hangar. George came back with, you can't do both, it's one or the other. And I don't think he grasped, I gave him all of our information, he came back with what I sent you midweek. And then for a conversation this morning, he shook his head on the phone, I could tell, and said, I get it now. Okay, I get what you're trying to accomplish. Which was, how does this gentleman invest his dollars in one of our buildings? It's dilapidated and costing us money. And it's a win for him, it's a win for us, and we make some money on the deal. So if he walks away, we've got a better building. So he said, in this example, this is a true airport hangar lease. It would be written between the airport authority and Ryan. Ryan mentioned to us in his request a term of 20 years, because his kids will be out of school in 20 years. At that point, he's liable to want to move. So we would need to come up with, what do we want to charge him? So that he puts his investment dollars into the building and not into our pockets up front, so that the building does get better. So we had come up with the idea, do we have a sliding scale? Do we charge him $1 amount per month for the first 5 years at a low point, let him put his money in initially, and then change it for the final 15 years? And this is still up for discussion. So those numbers could change to 7 and 13 if you wanted, however, but come up with a price point that we're leasing him the ground under the building.
So we continue to have ownership of it?
We would own the building. We can't sell the building to him.
And the discussion was to just charge him whatever the other tenants are paying for the land for the first 5 or so years while he's making all the repairs, and then have a second fee for what the hangar would pull in on top of the land.
So when we get to 15 or 20 years, then it reverts
At
to us?
20 years, the building is ours.
All right,
Yep.
okay.
So, he's built in typical hold harmless claims, the improvements, he put in a section here that says the lessee, Ryan, agrees that the lease is dependent on him putting in specific dollar amounts or specific, there's specific goals. So point A could be, he's gotta have a new door on that building hung by a certain date. And he's gonna have to fix the building's windows and heating by a certain date. And point C could be that he's gonna repaint the building by a certain date. We work with him to determine those. And it goes on to say in that section that the airport director would have the authority to sign off on that. He would review the plans, sign off on it, and follow up to make sure it was completed. He can't sublet it. We can go in the building when we want to check it out. There's timelines here written into it to make sure that he's either getting it done and paying us on a certain time, or he gets removed.
And it's only for airport use, not
Correct.
storage facility.
Correct.
And Barry's okay with this now? Because at the meeting, Barry wasn't okay with babysitting it.
I don't know, cause this, I got this, I printed it and got in the car to drive up here. So it's really, this is for your eyes to maybe read through and take a look, and we'll go back to the committee. Really what it's gonna boil down to is, what do we think he's willing to invest in the building? And if it was, if he's gonna spend $40,000 on this building,
How
which
much?
is easily $40,000.
40,000?
I think by the time you paint it, put windows in it, put a door on it, you're at 40 without blinking an eye.
Wow.
So if 40 is the number that we say, if he would spend 40, we'll work with him. And it costs us nothing, and at the end of 20 years, we're gonna get a better building back. So if 40 is a number divided by 20 years of payments.
Is he got an estimate on this or something? Is he gonna go to work
He's,
himself?
he did provide us estimates, and I can sit down and get a more detailed, he's waiting to hear the reaction of today.
Mhm.
And I can sit down with him and say, what do you really feel like you're gonna spend? But if it was 40, am I thinking wrong in that if you divide 40 by 48, what's 20 years times 12 payments?
20 years times.
Yeah.
240.
So simple math, with no interest, would say that if he divided 40,000 by 240 payments, that's his monthly lease, correct?
Well, 240 payments over 20 years, so 40,000 divided by that. Yeah, 166.
A month. And he gets the bill with a promise, based on these timelines, that he's gonna put it in to the building. If he doesn't, it's written that we can ask him to move out. The question is, that's simple math. If I meet with him and come up with a number, then we come up with my suggestion, or the committee's suggestion was, do we charge him a lot less for the first 5 years? So he puts it all into the building. Then if he does walk away, we've got that invested in the building.
It seems reasonable.
Nothing ventured, nothing gained is my thought. I mean, what's it doing sitting there now?
Deteriorating.
Yeah. So I don't know if you've had a chance to read through this.
I have not.
Again, George was pretty adamant once he understood the big picture on a phone call. And trust me, I tried to reach him for the last 10 days. It's been very difficult. But I just want to bring it up. We're making progress. If I meet with Ryan after this meeting to say, okay, let's get down to the nitty gritty. I know what you told us before. What do you really think you're going to spend in 20 years? And then come back to the committee with a recommendation. And so essentially tell Ryan, maybe by next month's meeting, we can have this done.
But didn't he need to get in there sooner?
In the meantime, he would like to just move his airplane out of Barry's hangar in there and get started. So, per a message from him 2 days ago, this is what he said. Hi Doug, would you see if the airport would lease me the hangar until they figure out the terms of this sale? See, he's still saying sale. So I can start working on it now before the snow flies. If they would sign a 24-month lease for say $100 to $125 a month in the condition it's in, I would not hesitate to start spending time and money on it until we could get it closed for the sale. He doesn't, again, he keeps saying sale. Any news on the terms of it? I know you're busy, appreciate the help. I said I'd get to him after this meeting. So I don't think we need to sell the building. And in George's, you can't do both. You can't ground lease it and sell it. And if we sell it, we lose control over it. And we don't get it back.
We lease it, we make lease payments. Small, I guess, for the first 5 years.
I'm fine with what you're trying to accomplish.
I thought we were just gonna do the ground lease, whatever the other agreements were for the ground lease, and just the hangar rental itself would be covered by whatever improvements he made. The only thing I'm concerned about was I thought Barry said he didn't wanna have to babysit it, and this language has him babysitting the improvements.
Somebody has.
Yeah.
I took from our notes that somewhere in there, there's gotta be benchmarks to protect us.
Well, how much time is it gonna take Barry or somebody to go out there and look and see what kind of progress has been made?
Well, this says he's gonna approve the airport director's gonna put in writing approval of.
The progress made?
So if he comes and says, okay, I'm gonna have a door here, I wanna hang this particular door in the next 2 months, and it's gonna cost me $10,000. Barry looks at the plans, make sure somebody's doing it properly, and then Barry just signs off on it.
Okay.
Or the director.
Right. The challenge is that there's no criteria as to what's a reasonable improvement, so it's purely subjective. If, you're comfortable with that, I'm comfortable overseeing it, but if there are certain things you want or don't want, then those should be specified, otherwise none of the parties that are actually involved in, following through on this know that intent.
Well, if you're overseeing it, when we have meetings and you give us an update on it, then.
What Barry's saying is if it's a door, there should be a standard for a door, for a hangar to be met. So it's not subjective to him going, yes, that's good.
Mhm. Yeah, that makes sense.
But I've got enough faith an engineer that he's going to,
Do right.
yeah.
It's his airplane.
It's his airplane that's
sitting
going in and
inside it.
out.
So it's, essentially, we're deferring the payments to his investment.
Mhm.
So if we come
For
to an
5
agreement
years.
that,
For 5 years, right?
correct, or for the life of a 20-year lease.
Yeah, you're looking at a price tag for the first 5 at X and then changing it to a price tag for the final 15,
Yeah.
20-year contract
Yeah.
at Y.
Okay, yeah.
So I'll meet with Ryan, I'll call him and meet with him right away, follow up with George and the committee to see if this is in the ballpark. In the meantime, if he wanted to sign a short-term lease, I wouldn't say 24 months like he asked, I'd do a month to month, if it were me. If he wants to move in there tomorrow, we sign a document, say he's got a month-to-month lease, we just take our standard airport hangar tenant lease that I signed when I was here, and allow him to convert to this as soon as he can.
Should
And
we provide some oversight on this too?
we will,
Okay.
but, so I guess I'm gonna make a proposal coming out of this meeting that we agree with, to allow Ryan to have a month, but wait a minute, Barry, our lease is month to month anyways, isn't it?
Yes.
So there's no, so we can just sign a typical standard lease with him. We just don't have a dollar amount for that hangar.
Well, he's proposed one. Is there anybody that's against his proposal, because it's not making anything right now?
I would go to the 125, which would match the lowest other lease, hangar we have. So,
Which page is that on this?
It's not in his-
he just sent me an email
Oh,
and
okay.
asked if he could move in right away and sign a lease for, in an as-is condition for that. So we're not providing any electric in there that I'm aware of.
There's electric.
There is. So he would be responsible, just like the other tenants, that he pays the electric.
No, it's not metered.
I pay the electric in the blue T hangers.
Yeah, but that building does not have metered electric, so we can't
Oh, can't. All right.
charge them separately, so.
This is gonna get done within a month. I have a pretty solid feeling. As my dying last action on the board to get that wrapped up. I can't fix the billboard, you're gonna have to do that yourself.
I mean, if you live out of town, you have a different way.
But let me meet with him and go forward. And then, we don't really need, if he wants to sign a lease to rent a hangar, that doesn't need any action here, I don't think. Good Christmas. So that is the committee reports that took place this last month. So moving on, if there's no other questions on that, we'll go to the airport director's report.
Sorry I was stepping out there, but I had actually a meeting scheduled with Bob Carson at 2.
Did you get hold of him?
He got the message when he got here, so. Yeah, I apologize to him.
You know, I've got 13 more minutes and I gotta hit the road, so, just so you know.
Okay, so airport incidents, none for the month. Oh yeah, I probably should hand those out. Thank you. As I mentioned last month, our annual meeting with the state MDOT was on October 2nd. There
They're going.
Oh, it's going on.
Oh,
three things that came out of that meeting. And I guess I'll actually go at these in kind of reverse order. So other than completing our runway resurfacing project, which from their view is a this year project, even though it's gonna be done next year, from a funding perspective, that's wrapped up. Next year's funded project is an update of our airport layout plan. That's basically looking at, the last time that was done was 20 years ago. It is something that the FAA requires about every 20 years. And the information we've been getting from the state is they're not going to fund any future projects here until we get that document up to date. It's in some ways more of an engineering type plan. It's all sorts of drawings and things that really talk about everything that is on the airport or is planned for the airport. Typically associated with that, there would also be an updated master plan as well. The state tends not to like funding master plans because they think they're kind of a waste of money. The FAA encourages them, so we spent a lot of time talking about what should we do, and that's kind of why I have a plus there. So we came out of this is that we're going to just do an updated airport layout plan, but with kind of an expanded textual lead-in that kind of does some of the things that a master plan would do. And specifically, the types of things that I'm most concerned about here is the justifications for runway extension, for other potential projects that are going to be on that airport layout plan, as opposed to just having a drawing that shows these entities. There needs to be enough backing and information as to why those are there, such that when we get to the point of hopefully doing some of those projects, we will have all of our I's dotted and T's crossed. So going in, we expected that to be a lot of discussion. That actually went fairly smoothly. Number 2 on this list is an updated airport approach plan, which is, it's all part of this zoning stuff, which was the reason I was meeting with Rob after this meeting. And we have some documents that the state gave us that they want Manistee Township to buy off on, but because the township's going through a new master planning process, I've been kind of holding off, but I've basically run out of time, so Rob and I are gonna figure out how we can manage the state on this, given where the township is. And then finally, the thing that probably was the most controversial is the first item here. And we've just, part of the challenges that we've just gone through with our current project, the runway resurfacing, was the repainting of the runways. We basically are being told by our inspectors that that's something that they would like to see done every year. We can probably live with it every 2 years. 3 years, you're pushing the limits. That's coming because we're a Part 139 airport and we're held to higher standards. General aviation airports in the state routinely repaint every 3 years. We are only one of 2 airports in the state that work with the state directly for funding, because we're not 10,000 enplanements, we're not a primary airport. Once you get that funding, you work directly with the FAA, you bypass the state. But because we're not there, we and Ironwood are the 2 139 airports that have to go through the state block grant program. So we're dealing with people that on a day-to-day basis say, oh, we pay for painting every 3 years, and I've got inspectors that are saying, well, 1 year would be great, 2 years is really where you need to be at. So there's a disconnect there. And that came out in the meeting, and the email follow-up from that meeting from the person that basically runs these meetings, I'm going to read her comment on this. Sponsor, that's us, should have discussions with Airport Authority about the frequency and funding for airfield paint marking as requested by the FAA inspector. There's limited amount of federal and state funding to handle every other year. Local funding source and or handling this work locally for the sponsor until the sponsor can fully fund with our non-primary entitlements. So basically they're pushing back and saying we need to be contributing more money because they don't want to pay for this every other year. So myself and and Prina Newhoff thinks this is completely unreasonable, but that's the pushback we are getting. So I just wanted to pass that on. Our annual Part 139 inspection is now scheduled for middle of November. Hopefully they will like the fact that we've got nice new painting this year. for them to look at. Fuel system monitor update. It has failed 3 times in the last month, basically resetting itself, been reprogrammed. And as of now, I can't get successful leak tests out of either fuel tank, so we are at the point where something needs to be done ASAP. I think once these contracts that the board approved are signed, unless the board feels otherwise, I would like to move forward with basically procuring the repairs for that system.
Got an estimate on that, per chance?
$10,000.
$10,000, there is an opportunity for a refurbished system that I'm hoping will be less. I want to compare.
It'd have to be substantially less.
Yes, compare the pros and cons of an obsolete refurbished system versus a new system that has a longer lifespan, but I need to do the due diligence on both of those paths. As I mentioned last month, the meter on the Jet A tank has failed. Northern Pump has currently provided us with a loaner. They ordered it at the time. It was a 4 to 6 week lead time item, so I'm expecting that will arrive sometime in the next month, and that's roughly $2,000 to $3,000. So not much has changed, but that's where things stand. Airfares. So the information here is fairly similar to what we've been seeing. Traverse City, very competitive, within about $25 of Grand Rapids right now on average. We are about $80 more than Traverse City, about $200 more than on average than Grand Rapids. Again, fairly consistent with what we've been seeing for the last few months. So I won't dwell on that. To exit. Screen. On passenger numbers for September, we were down 22% from September a year ago. Take into account that we had airline service scheduled 10 days of the 30 days of the month. So there are many factors that led to that. But at the same time, a year ago, we didn't have service on Friday or Saturday. So the number of days we didn't have service this month versus last year, we had fewer days of service this year, but 22% is a big hit. There are other reasons for that that I will get to when I get to a little bit later in my report. Also, we saw that we saw many more delays this month. Not significant delays, but on the order of an hour delayed on flights. You'll see that that delay number was 21% of flights for the month. One canceled flight, that was weather related, so that wasn't a concern. But the delays were, but again, I'll touch on a little bit more of some of the reason why on that in a second. Land acquisition, we are still waiting on the submittals from Mr. Adamczyk for the expenses he incurred for relocation costs so that we can get that final reimbursement put together.
Does the clock run out on that or not?
I think we've got 4 years from the time the grant was awarded, so yes, it does run out, but it's
What
a
about for
ways.
him to get it in though?
No.
No.
Some of this is repeat, so we're rescheduled for runway resurfacing end of May, early June next year. The crack sealing and remarking was completed since the last meeting. It was just starting on the day of our last meeting. And we do have a change order drafted to basically encompass these changes to Reith Riley's contract. And last month, the board had asked me to go back to our attorney, to go back to Reith Riley and express that we didn't feel it was fair for them to essentially make extra profit because the contract got expanded because of these issues and we were incurring costs. I've done that, although George hasn't yet gotten back with, hasn't followed through. I reached out to George 4 or 5 times in the last month, and it wasn't until last Thursday that he actually responded to me. And over the weekend, he further responded. And the other thing that the board had asked me to do was to calculate costs and lost revenue for this period of time next year. We can point to about $2,000 in hard costs and lost revenue. So that's kind of a minimum. Then there's the opportunity cost of using up $50,000 of our grant funding for this purpose versus using it for other projects that, you know, should be used. So that's kind of the range that I've given to George. His question to me was, should he go back to Reeve Riley with a specific number, or is his request more of trying to see if they're open to any discussion on this fact? And I said, as of last month, the board hadn't made a decision. You asked me to put together some
I think
numbers.
you're
which I
better,
did.
you're better off going with a specific number than saying, well, would you guys be agreeable to?
Right. But as of last month, we didn't have a specific number,
Right.
so it's roughly $2,000 would be hard costs or lost revenue. And those are composed of fuel flow fees that we wouldn't be capturing because we won't be selling fuel because people won't be here because the airport will be closed. Landing fees, passenger facility charge fees because we won't be enplaning any passengers, and then our match on those additional grant funds. The total of those is about $2,000. So if you'd like me to go back with a specific recommendation to George to answer his question, I can do that, or
I just think you need, if you go in, if you don't have a set number in place, to some degree, it's gotta be quantifiable. And if you don't have that, if you sit down and, well, we think we'd like to have this, are you guys amenable to that? You gotta go in a little stronger position than that,
so
That's
it's basically
quantifiable.
between 2,000 and 52,000 are really the,
Sounds like 75,
7,500?
75,000.
2,000 isn't worth asking for.
No.
But if we're just trying to recoup a little bit of our cost and put it in our coffers,
And how much more are they getting in revenue out of this?
well, the increase in scope is $50,000, so what profit margin they have on that? And that's services that are subcontracted out, so they may have less profit margin on that than they would
$10,000.
things they do for themselves.
If you ask for 10 and you get 5,
Yeah.
I wouldn't ask for less than 10.
Okay.
All right. I've got a 2:30 that I thought I'd be done with this one by now, but I gotta go for that one, so. All right, we'll see you. Gotta go.
Good one.
Thank you.
So we are losing our quorum at this point, so we don't take any further action.